I started out with a Mazda Miata, and it really kind of got me into the rear-wheel drive cars. And the quest for more power really was like, I mean, the four-cylinder was cool, but I needed more power, and how could I do this cheaply while I was in college? And stumbled across the E39 and realized that it was such a solid platform to get started on that it just kind of sparked my interest in the BMWs in general. Really the thing that sold me on it the most, and I know it's kind of young and dumb, but it had the Style 5 wheels on it and it had sport trim. And I thought that was so neat when I had that car. And I drove it for probably 3 months, 4 months until I needed to pay tuition. And at that time in my life, my friends would always joke because I'd go from driving a really nice car to something that was as cheap as I could possibly afford because tuition was due. The only way to make payment on that would be to sell my car and then sell a couple more and then flip up into another nice car. It wasn't actually until a little bit later when I had graduated college and kind of established a job. And the very first thing I did was turn around and I bought that E36 M3. And it was finally my dream car. Like, I remember seeing the Vader interior, and I was like, that is by far the coolest seat I think any company has ever made. And I mean, I hate to say it was like the mirrors and the seats that did it for me, but buying the car afterward, it was like, all right, this thing's sweet. Just the driving style, the feel of it. And it was my reward to myself for making it through college, getting a job, and finally I was able to buy the dream car. And yeah, so it's just kind of been snowball effect ever since then. My very first car, I was 14 and got a 1997 Dodge conversion van, and it needed a serpentine belt and an alternator, and that was kind of a big job for me at that age. It had like the engine compartment in the inside that you had to remove, and then the hood is really tight, and felt really accomplished after finishing that task. And I remember selling it for $750, and that for me as 14 was like, man, I'm rich. The reason why I started getting into German cars in the first place is because when I could only afford like a $3,000 car, they were the only car that offered the things I wanted, like leather and heated seats. And I mean, at that time, not every car came with a sunroof, and that was something that I really wanted. And in order to get all of that and still have an inexpensive car, I had to go German. I don't think that balancing car life with other life is terribly difficult because my life is cars. I have a very understanding wife who listens to me talk cars all of the time. And at least I think I tell myself that's the reason why I haven't made it my career, is because I don't want to burn myself out of my hobby. Yeah, I guess how I balance car life is just by making it everything. I make sure to mention it to most people. Yeah, I think people will call me and say, do you want this car? Which is what happened with the red one. Or I'll just find a decent deal on one that just needs saving, and I've got the parts laying around to fix it. You got to look at them as liquid. So I have the cars around as a liquid investment, because if I need to free up some cash, yes, I'll have to decide which ones I'm going to sell, because that'll be hard, but I know that I can. Whereas if I just have a savings account, I'll likely wind up spending it on other random stuff. So it's a good way at saving because you're not having that to blow on things, but it's also a good way to enjoy it while you have it. I typically am one to go with aesthetics first. And it may seem kind of backwards because a lot of guys are trying to make that car the best version of performance standards, but I don't really go to a racetrack anymore, and so for me, I'd like to have that car look sweet. and it's usually subtle little tweaks. I'm a big fan of the OEM Plus, so if I can find stock wheels that look good on that car from a different generation, then I'll obviously go that route. And I do like to lower all my cars. Not all of them are slammed, but they definitely all need a little bit of low. And especially with these E36s, man, the first upgrade is glass lens headlights. So yes, I do approach aesthetics first, but that's also because the E36 is a really good car stock. You don't really need that much performance-wise. I do a good job at kind of leading my friends to make the decision of buying a BMW, especially when they say they're shopping. I will usually say, hey, best bang for your buck is one of these cars. And because of that, I typically get to drive a lot of them. And I also like to test drive newer models and things like that. Like, I'll never turn down the opportunity to drive a different car. So because of that, yeah, I've driven, I want to say, at least every generation. What keeps me coming back to the E36 all the time, and this is having owned E46s, E30s, and, well, the lot, is the fact that there's not another car on the road that you feel that small in, but also that confident in. You don't necessarily have to have ridiculous amounts of horsepower in order to have the car be fun. And I think that a lot of the newer cars are so fast that you can't actually enjoy them to their limits. Driving that car at its limit is the most fun. And I mean, it's only a 240 horsepower engine, but the way that it puts that power down is, perfectly balanced for that car. One of the sweet styling cues that they offered in the 90s, they didn't have the window frame. And so that's always sweet. I love just having the straight rectangular door that you open up. And then you move more towards the interior, and at least in these two cars here, they're both adorned in the Vader interior. And then they've also got the really sweet, the M stripes in the seats and the big bolsters. And that was really what I think the BMW designers intended to be the focal point of the car. But then there's other really cool cues that they offered too, like the leather-wrapped 3-spoke steering wheel that has M Sport stitching on the inside, and the really unique triangular center vent that's sounded in the middle of the dashboard. And then you follow that down, and you've got this really 90s looking radio, which back in my teenage years I probably would have pulled out to put it in an aftermarket with bright lights, but now I realize that it's timeless and it works in the interior. The E36 isn't America's favorite M3, or isn't even the world's favorite M3, because at least in the States, they say that they dumbed down the engine by giving us just a revamped version of the M52 and didn't have independent throttle bodies, but ours are really reliable and they're bulletproof. And it's really easy to look over the E36 because it doesn't have drastic changes to the body. And I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons why it caught so much flack, is because they thought that it was just like BMW's version of sending us a GT car that they think would sell to the masses. And they weren't wrong, they sold a ton of them. But following the E30, it was kind of a letdown, because the E30s had the big nice box fenders and the modified trunk lid and the cool sloping back windshield. And then I think they heard those complaints, and when they came out with the E46, they gave us this gorgeous car. I mean, the E46, in my opinion, is the best looking M3, but they just weren't the same tight feeling that the E30 had. It didn't have that same close-knit race car feel, and they were bigger. And so it's not that I have anything against them. I love all of the other ones, but I just am always so drawn to the E36 for the vents in the hood and the subtle 90s styling that really kind of encapsulates everything that is BMW, but also is the bastard child.